Former U.S. President Trump has made history as a criminal defendant in federal court in Miami. He's accused of illegally keeping highly classified documents after leaving the White House. This is a first for a former U.S. president being charged with federal crimes. Trump has pled not guilty. No surprise. For more, Nathan King, of course, watching all of this for us live in Miami, and quite the circus, Nathan.
Absolute circus. You know, there's those headlines, Phil, Florida man. All today was Florida man. There were a sort of circus atmosphere here with protesters, counter-protesters, and the cops, unlike in New York where they kept them separate, remember those metal barriers, they would just let them mill around, be part of the media. It was all it felt like a farmer's market, but a Trumpian one, if you know what I mean. And then when Trump arrived, big support. But when he left, there was one guy, and I'm not joking, dressed as in a jumpsuit with black and white stripes on it, who tried to jump the motorcade. He got wrestled to the ground by the Trump supporters, and now I think he's in the courthouse behind us, facing jail. Now, Trump, of course, if these charges against him, could face a long time in jail too. 31 counts of retaining documents that affect national defense. The rest are obstruction of justice charges as well. He did plead not guilty. We don't know when the trial will be held, but we understand prosecutors want to hold this within 70 days. Trump may want to delay because, of course, he's also running for president for a second time. Now, just to give you a sense of the atmospheres, the costume, the political craziness of this whole thing, let's bring you a couple of supporters, because some of these outfits are just quite incredible, Phil.
I think it's the worst thing in the history of America besides President Lincoln and President Kennedy being assassinated. What they're doing now, they're essentially trying to send him jail for life, all those felony counts, and he's 76 years old. Tomorrow's his birthday. Happy birthday, President Trump. Anyway, this is a horrible thing.
This is about America. America claims nobody's above the law, but Mike Pence says, except Trump. Mike Pence said he had documents that he gave back. Biden had documents that he gave back, and that was good. Trump had documents that he didn't give back, but we should forget it as American people. We shouldn't hold him accountable.
So what went on in that courtroom? Well, of course, cameras weren't allowed in, reporters rushed out, but we have these wonderful things called court artists, and I've just had a look at some of the sketches that have just come out, and you can see a scowling Donald Trump with his arms folded, staring directly. Remember, next to him, or nearby, a few meters away, was Smith, the special counsel, who basically is leading the investigation, not into just this case, but of course charges that may relate to January 6th and his role in the insurrection as well. So these guys are definitely at the opposite ends of where they want this legal drama to end. What dates we're going to get, we don't know exactly yet. This, of course, will play out during the primary and potential election season. What we do know is Trump has been ruled to not speak about this case to anyone, even the other person who was charged in this case, one of his employees, Walt Nauta, who was seen with him leaving the court. And I can tell you, just to add to the circus, do you think Trump just went straight to Bedminster to prepare for his rally press conference? No. He went to Little Havana, to the most famous restaurant in Miami, Versailles, where they sung him happy birthday. They led a prayer. He knows that it's not the court behind me necessarily that will decide his future, but the court of public opinion.
Well, that aside, we are awaiting a speech from Trump in a couple hours that, you know, I don't know how he's going to talk about this without talking about it. I guess we'll see. That's what we do now.
He'll find a way.
The issue with Trump is, look, people have already made their decision whether they support him or don't support them. There's this little thing called the presidential election. I don't know if you're diving into what these sort of moderate Republicans or conservative Democrats or independents. Is this going to change the way people vote and look at him?
Well, there's two things going on here, right? There's the Republican base, which is still, the polls say for now, very loyal to President Trump with about 30 to 40% approval of him. And then there's all these other contenders who want that 30, 40%, or at least part of it. Now, we're starting to see some movement. Nikki Haley, whose husband serves in the military, came out and said, look, I don't like these charges, classified documents, people going to harm's way to defend American secrets. We've had Tim Scott The Republican senator, the only African-American Republicans in the Senate, say similar things. Chris Christie, of course, going straight after Trump, whose sole job it is to derail him. Even Ron DeSantis' careful #2 rival, suggesting that, you know, holding on to classified documents, if proven, is a bad thing. Because I tell you, take time to read the 49-page indictment. I did 2 or 3 times over the weekend. It is just an incredible document. And what if any of what the government alleged sticks? Not only do they have him holding some of America's biggest secrets, war plans potentially against Iran, nuclear deterrence, etc., details, but they may have him on tape, it looks like, according to the filing, basically saying, I have these documents, I get these documents, they are still secret, I'm going to keep them, I'm not giving them back, do you want to have a look? I mean, that on tape, that's hard. If anyone can get out of it, Donald Trump can, but we'll see.
It is a very serious situation. Nathan King, appreciate it. Thank you very much. For more perspective on this indictment, we're going to bring in Craig Green, law professor at Temple University. Welcome to the show. I want to say it's a momentous day, but we've had days like this before, obviously not exactly the same. Do you agree with what Nathan said when it comes to the way voters portray what this indictment looks like?
Yeah, it's been a rough month for Trump, really. The indictment in New York, the indictment today, and also the $5 million sexual harassment defamation verdict from a civil jury. So I think in terms of what people think of Trump, there's a lot of different opinions. And, you know, I think some people have rallied behind him, including giving more money. I think it's very, very difficult for other Republican candidates as they're trying to win votes among that same crowd. So, for example, even though Nikki Haley criticized some aspects, I think later in the day she said she would pardon him. And there are other candidates who said if they're elected, they'll pardon Trump from these federal charges. So I think that the American public is very fractured, but I think the Republican electorate, that side of the electorate, is actually consolidating a little bit.
For our international audience, you know, I had a chance to take a look at some of the details of the indictment, and a lot of it had to do with war planning. There were some very serious and sensitive topics when it came to our international friends around the world. How do they view this indictment? Obviously, there's a trust with the United States, but at the same time, there's sort of a little bit of, you know, a little bit of laughter on this indictment when it comes to President Trump, not just because of the history, but because of where we are at and the fact he's actually running for president again. How does the international audience react to this?
Yeah, I'm sure that the international audience is split as well, but I think the most serious aspect of this is that anyone who trusts the American government to keep documents secret, anyone who trusts the American defense establishment to maintain that kind of secrecy that's expected among allies and feared among adversaries, I think not only are Mr. Trump's failings personally damaging, but can you imagine if he were president again and vindicated in this kind of behavior, pardoned perhaps from the criminal charges, and mishandling future documents of this kind? I think that allies and adversaries would look at things really in a different kind of way than what the American national security establishment would like. I think there's a very bad look, as they might say, in the international audience.
The indictment is extremely serious and quite damning in many respects. Do you think that's going to change the minds of if there are still those on the fence or even staunch supporters of Trump? Would it change their mind as to what might be good for the future of the U.S.?
I mean, I think that there are 2 stages to the election. So the Republican Party, I think, is going to vote for Donald Trump. I think it becomes more likely every day. But then when you have what effectively is a rematch between Biden and Trump, the biggest argument against Biden is that he's 4 years older than he was 4 years ago. And the biggest arguments against Trump are that he's facing 2 criminal indictments and 1 civil jury verdict for $5 million sexual assault and defamation. And I think that it's very hard to see how Donald Trump, on the facts that we'll have coming around to November, how he's going to make a lot of headway with independent, middle-of-the-road voters. Those are not attractive features that Donald Trump is racking up one after the other in the last few months.
Right, and for journalists, I think they feel about 8 or 12 years older after following this case. The legal fees, you know, you watch what's happening out there. Someone has to pay for these legal cases, and in the event that Trump is officially indicted. I don't know what the timeline is going to be. Nathan didn't tell us what the next dates are, but this is going to fall right in the middle of potentially the full-on election cycle. That's got to impact Trump, right? You got the money problem, you've got the perception problem, and then you have this legal issue.
Well, first on the calendar, which is the most important thing. So Republicans have to make their decisions with an indicted candidate. They won't know if he's convicted or not. But this case, unlike the New York case, this case involves very complicated documents, which could take some amount of time for lawyers to go through. And one very important piece of evidence is actually testimony from Trump's own attorney. And that evidence is often privileged, cannot be used in court, but under certain narrow circumstances it can. So there are actually a lot of preliminary legal fights that might happen on the way to a trial in this case, which I think push the calendar even farther back. So I think that, again, the likelihood of getting any verdict in this case before the primary season is almost zero. The likelihood of getting a judgment before the general election is not great. And then the last thing lurking is if Trump were to win the presidency, he could arguably pardon himself. And I think that this idea, of course, other Republican candidates are also promising to pardon him. And the idea that one might very well get a conviction on very serious national security charges and charges of a cover-up, and then an election would basically wash all of that away. I think that's an extremely destructive possibility for American rule of law and American democracy alike.
Right. All right, Professor, thank you very much for providing those answers and raising some questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.